Now let us go deeper into the story. Earlier we talked about how a conflict in the Middle East can affect oil prices and transport costs. But the connection between this war and Africa goes even further. To understand this better, imagine the global economy like a giant web. Every country is connected to another country through trade, energy, money, and technology. When something big happens in one part of that web, the movement spreads through the entire system. And that is exactly what happens during major international conflicts. Let us look at a simple example. Many African countries import fuel. Even countries that produce oil often refine their fuel outside the continent and then import it back. This means the price of fuel in Africa is often connected to global markets. So if tensions rise between Iran, Israel, and the United States, traders in global oil markets become nervous. When traders become nervous, they start buying and selling oil quickly because they fear supply disruptions. This activity can push oil prices higher. Now imagine what happens next. A transport company in Nairobi suddenly has to pay more for fuel. A bus driver in Lagos spends more money filling his tank. A farmer transporting tomatoes from the countryside to the city must also pay higher transport costs. And slowly, step by step, these costs spread through the entire economy. The final result? The price of everyday goods can increase. This is why economists often say something very important. Global conflicts can create local consequences. But oil is not the only connection between this war and Africa. There is another very important link. Trade routes. You see, a large portion of global shipping passes through waters near the Middle East. One of the most important routes is the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway connects the Persian Gulf to the rest of the world. Every day, massive oil tankers and cargo ships travel through this route carrying energy and goods to different continents. If tensions in the region grow too high, shipping companies may become cautious. Some ships may delay their journeys. Insurance costs for cargo may rise. And shipping prices can increase. This might sound like a technical issue, but the effects can reach faraway places. For example, many African countries import important goods from Asia and other parts of the world. Electronics. Machinery. Industrial equipment. Even some food products. If global shipping becomes more expensive, businesses in Africa must pay higher costs to bring those goods into the continent. And when businesses pay more, customers usually pay more too. But the story does not end with economics. There is also a political dimension to this conflict. Africa has long tried to maintain a balanced relationship with many global powers. African leaders often say they want cooperation with all countries rather than choosing sides in global rivalries. This approach is sometimes called strategic neutrality. In simple terms, it means staying friendly with different partners while avoiding unnecessary conflict. This strategy has helped many African nations build relationships with countries across the world. The United States, European nations, China, Middle Eastern countries, and many others. But when major international tensions rise, maintaining that balance can become more difficult. For example, if the conflict between Iran and Israel becomes larger, global pressure could increase. Different countries may ask their partners to support certain political positions. This can place African governments in a challenging situation. They must protect their national interests while also maintaining international partnerships. That is why many African leaders are calling for calm and diplomacy. They believe dialogue and negotiation are better solutions than military escalation. But beyond government leaders, something else is happening across Africa. Ordinary people are talking about this conflict. And their opinions are often shaped by history, culture, and global politics. Some Africans feel sympathy for countries that they believe are resisting powerful global forces. Others support the right of nations to defend themselves against attacks. And many people simply wish for peace and stability everywhere. Social media platforms have become spaces where these different views are shared. Young Africans especially are very active in global discussions online. They follow international news. They debate political issues. And they often connect global events to their own local experiences. For many young people across the continent, this war is another reminder of how connected the world has become. A conflict in one region can dominate headlines across the globe within minutes. And the economic consequences can spread just as quickly. But there is also another important question that some experts are asking. Could conflicts like this push Africa to become more self-reliant? In other words, could global instability encourage African countries to strengthen their own economic systems? For example, Africa has large energy resources. Some countries produce oil. Others have enormous potential for solar power, wind energy, and hydroelectric energy. If African nations invest more in these resources, they may reduce their dependence on global fuel markets over time. That could make their economies more stable during international crises. Another important idea is regional trade. African countries are working to expand trade within the continent through agreements like the African Continental Free Trade Area. The goal is simple. If African countries trade more with each other, they may depend less on distant markets. This could reduce the impact of global disruptions. But these changes take time. Building infrastructure, energy systems, and trade networks requires long-term planning and investment. For now, Africa remains deeply connected to the global economy. And that means global events will continue to influence the continent. Still, there is something important to remember. Africa is not just a passive observer in world affairs. The continent is home to more than 1 billion people. Its population is growing rapidly. Its markets are expanding. And its political voice on the global stage is becoming stronger. Because of this, Africa's position in global discussions is becoming more important. African leaders increasingly participate in international negotiations on trade, climate policy, security, and economic development. And as the world becomes more interconnected, Africa's role will likely continue to grow. So when a conflict like the Iran-Israel crisis emerges, African voices also become part of the global conversation. Some call for peace. Some call for diplomacy. And many emphasize the need to protect economic stability for developing regions. These perspectives remind the world that international conflicts often have consequences far beyond the battlefield. They affect trade. They affect energy markets. They affect global confidence and investment. And ultimately, they affect ordinary people trying to build better lives. Which brings us to an important reflection. When powerful nations enter periods of tension, smaller economies often feel the ripple effects first. But these challenges can also inspire new ideas. They can encourage countries to rethink economic strategies, to strengthen cooperation, and to build systems that are more resilient to global shocks. As the Iran-Israel conflict continues to unfold, many Africans are watching carefully. Not because the war is happening on their soil, but because the outcomes could influence the global systems that shape everyday life on the continent.